folks. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Your time is valuable. I'm not going to waste it. Let's get right to the interview. Hey, folks. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Thanks you for joining me today. We have a guest that, if you follow high school basketball and you live in Nebraska, the name Kara Graham is not foreign to you. She has been a superstar with Southeast High School, both as a player and now as a coach. And so we'll welcome Kara to the show today. Thanks, Kara, for joining me.
Absolutely. Happy to join.
So let's start off. Give us a little history about Kara, where you were born, your upbringing, high school, education, all that good stuff. And we'll just go from there.
Sounds good. Yeah, I was actually born here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and really have spent the majority of my life here. We spent a couple of years, due to my dad's job, we spent a couple of years in Lake Zurich, Illinois, kind of a suburb of Chicago. But that was pre-K into kindergarten. I think I came back to Lincoln, middle of kindergarten, went to Holmes Elementary, Pound Middle School, Southeast High School. So kind of always been a Lincoln person, love the Midwest. My family consisted of, growing up, both my parents, and then I have an older sister and an older brother. Tried sports a little bit, but really became just big little sister fans because it just is a place where I thrived and I really enjoy every concept, everything about competition. Those two were much better students than I was. When they were in school, they felt that, I think, just a sense of accomplishment, and I felt it more in athletics. And so it was cool. It was a cool family thing too, because the whole crew at all of my track meets and basketball games. And so growing up, everything was kind of about Kara's sports. And I feel a little bad about that now, to be honest, but just great supporters, great family, and Lincoln and Southeast High School have kind of been home for me for a long time.
Yeah. I was doing some research on your history and your record, and in the early 90s, you're the Knights Class A state championship, 93, 94, and 95.
That's right. We were very fortunate. So when I was in middle school, and it's not the same now, you had to live in your attendance area of what high school you went to. And I was fortunate. Now it's like school choice everywhere. So you can choose whatever high school you want to go to and drive as far as you want every morning and every night to go to that school. But at the time, it was the Nebraska Department of Education said you have to go to the high school that's in your attendance area. And we had just moved into Southeast attendance area. We were downsized and needed to financially. And it worked out really well for me. John Larson was the head coach here, and he had been here for a really long time with a lot of success in the late 80s and early 90s. And I was like, I want to play for that guy. You go to the Bob Devaney Sports Center every winter as a kid, watching teams compete for state championships. And you just kind of recognize what kind of culture you want to be around. And my parents really liked the way how hard he was on kids, how much expectations mattered to him, and thought he would hold me to a high standard. And so I went to Southeast High School, and we did have a lot of success. I wasn't the only one. There was actually 3 of us freshmen coming in together that kind of became a staple here for those 4 years. Freshman year, we lost in the first round, and we kind of decided from there we weren't going to let that happen again. And ended up with a three-peat. Like I said, a lot to do with just being fortunate with really good teammates and good coaches.
Good deal. You mentioned that you played various sports. What did you play, and then how did you eventually settle on basketball as the one that you wanted to commit to wholeheartedly?
Yeah, great question. I was just, again, I loved competition. I loved all of it. The early stages growing up, it really was a lot of track and field. I loved to run, not distance. I wouldn't say I loved to run, so to speak, but I love the concept of track. Like you've got someone in front of you, you want to go catch them, and you got to be tough and mentally and trained physically to do that. And I really enjoyed it. So we traveled all over with Lincoln Youth Track Club when I was young, and it was always good family vacations too. So my parents kind of liked that, but we spent a lot of time with track when I was younger. My sister did as well. And then you know, as a female, you start to get a little bit more mature and gain some hips and get a little slower, if I'm going to be honest. And
I'm not
started
touching that
enjoying.
one.
No, I stay away from that one, buddy. But I'm just telling you a fact. It's
Yeah.
harder the older we get.
Yeah.
It's just some of us are built differently, and so I
Hmm.
clearly wasn't going to be, a speedster. I was started focus on more on skill sports like volleyball and basketball. And basketball, just one of the things was my dad loved the game of basketball. So
Mm.
we obviously watched Husker football growing up, and anything to do with competitive team sports, I really just kind of always caught on to as well. And as much as I think track and field is a team sport, it is very much based on your own individual output. Whereas basketball just became a love of mine because of how necessary it was to rely on other people and how they relied on you and how much work ethic I needed to put in order to not let those people down. And then it was just a bonding experience with my dad, and that was really big at that time in my life as a youngster.
Hmm.
Wanted to be around him and do whatever he thought was cool. So by the time I was probably 10, 11, I was still, gosh, I was a national long jump champion, when I was 10 years old.
Hmm.
But then that which I'm sure has something to do with Tim, somebody was sick that day or something and didn't make it. But we we uh we by the time I was 12, it was clear track wasn't going to be it. And I really did love just going out in the driveway and shooting with my dad and shooting
Hmm.
baskets. And um I still did volleyball and track in high school, but basketball was my true love. And you know how a lot of times too, it's really just as simple as you have a little success when you're young, and I'm 12 or 13 years old, and the ball goes in the basket a couple times and somebody tells you, wow, you're good at that, this is great. And so then you just kind of pursue it a little bit more because
Mm.
you're encouraged that that is something that maybe you could find success in, and it's enjoyable to succeed too. So that's really honestly a big part of it too.
Yeah, that boost of self confidence I can see would really be motivating for a young person who's, that's tough to kind of figure out who you are and what you're going to do and what your skill set is. And when you find something that you're good at, it's nice to lean into it. And then you had success doing just that. So,
Yeah, and like I said, especially for a female in that 12 to 13 age,
hmm,
where self-confidence when you go into middle school for any boy or girl is it's
yeah,
tough.
it is.
And people are cruel, and like there's I I had horrible hair. I had other things. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't my sister. I wasn't a great student, or I couldn't sing like she could. And so I wanted to be like my sister. Like Lisa was the coolest person alive to me growing up. And so I always was like, God, I can't do what she does. And so anytime I found success with something else, I think I just kind of clung to that, hung on to it. And yeah, basketball was it.
So you're a three-peat state champion. You graduated from high school. What's next?
Yeah. So by the time I was a junior, I really believed I could play college basketball. And so I started pushing myself to that. And back at that time, again, I'm old. So in those mid 90s, there wasn't the club sports that we have now where you'd travel all over in the summers to
Yeah.
get looked at by college coaches. And so I was getting looked at by people in Nebraska. So the University of Nebraska, University of Nebraska Kearney, those schools that maybe I could play somewhere here local. And then I'd go to a couple of camps places and hope that maybe other colleges would see me, because otherwise you just send tapes out back then, where now it's so easy for coaches to find kids. And so I got recruited a little bit by a few different colleges, Nebraska Kearney. I almost took a visit to the Navy. That was interesting.
Huh.
Kind of a couple of East Coast smaller schools, smaller Division 1 schools. It became really clear to me, I thought early, and my parents were so good at being realistic with me, that I wasn't going to probably get a scholarship and play a lot of minutes at the D1 level. And so, and I believed I could play at the Division 1 level, but it would have taken, a couple years to work to earn that, which is fine. I loved the concept though of just continuing to play and compete right away. And then also I loved, for my parents' sake, again, just financially at the time, it was starting to be a little bit of a strain, and my siblings were having to, get loans and pay for school. And I watched that happen, and I thought, gosh, if I can get my school paid for, this helps me myself out for later, and obviously my family as well. So
Yeah.
I ended up going to UNK at Nebraska Kearney, and on a full ride scholarship and played basketball there for 4 years. Again, fortunate that played for a really good coach who was young and eager in Amy Stevens, and she had recruited really well. It was just her second year there that I came on, and so I was one of her first recruits. And we were just really good. So again, conference titles, conference tournament championships, good opportunities to go to national tournaments. Unfortunately, in in D2 at the time, boy, we ran up against teams that are now in the Sweet 16, like University of North Dakota,
Oh,
North
wow.
Dakota State, and these big girls who were just clearly raised differently, ate better than we did or lifted harder. I don't know.
Something
We
in the
ran into
water.
some juggernauts up there up north, but so fun. Really such a great learning experience because it was so hard. I think one of the things I try to work with athletes now on is how hard college sports are, and that I want you to want that, but please don't quit when it gets hard. It's very tough, and we learned a lot of tears, a lot of blood and tears to get through, a lot of injuries, just fight through as you're becoming an adult.
Hmm.
And I'm away from home, even it's only 2 hours away, it still felt away. And
Sure.
you have to figure out who your new support system is going to be, and these teammates and the people that are going through it with you. I just always love the concept of athletics for that reason, team and adversity and things that will help you in life in the future.
When you move from high school to college basketball,
Mhm.
is everything about it? I mean, I know it's more difficult because the competition is more skilled, but I would imagine that the speed and the aggressiveness and just everything about it is amped up. It goes from a 5 to an 11. I can't even imagine what it gets to be on the professional level, but
Oh, I know, right?
how do you shift gears as a coach or as a student? How do you shift gears in that? Do they just throw you into the deep end and go, this is how you learn? Or do they kind of guide you and go, all right, the first year is going to be, we're going to put on some weight, work on your skill set, tactics and strategies and stuff like that? Or how does that kind of play out?
Sure, I get what you mean. I'll be honest, it's especially if you're in a winning program like I was fortunate to be in, you really do just get thrown into the deep end. Like the
Yeah.
expectation is you're you're not we're not waiting for you. We're on this trajectory upward to make our team better, and the reason we recruited you and chose you is because we felt like you could help us even take that next step. So it's not like we're waiting for you to figure it out. And there's always goals like that come up. Like for me, I actually had to lose a couple pounds and put on some weight. Sorry, put on some strength instead, lose a little fat, and just again body type and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Whereas there were other kids, yeah, they had to feed them and get them more. The nutrition that people are able to do now at the college level is so huge, and then obviously strength training. That's all so different than what you do in high school. Even if you have great strength coaches in high school, it's always a step definitely from like what you said, 5 to 11. Like it
Hmm.
just all is a little bit more intense. We I'll never forget when my college coach, had this legendary high school coach, and we were well known for defense and just great pressing defense and lots of steals and layups and rotations, and we were very good defensively. And I remember my head coach in a drill one day in college said, I thought Coach Larson taught you how to play defense. This is
Oh,
terrible.
geez.
This is terrible. It was everything, wrong foot's forward and like all the technique stuff that's so different when you get to the college level that
Yeah.
is expected to just be, you're supposed to just have it. And when you're in high school, a lot of it's instinct and just, do you have skill or not that,
Hmm.
figure out how to make a group of girls work together. And at the college level, it is a lot more like individual skill needs to improve in order to help the team. So a lot of that technique stuff changes. But yeah, it was intense for sure.
So you are playing uh, collegiate ball. You're getting your degree. Then let's fast forward to you're done with college. How does the first step into your career? You started in teaching physical education. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So, I actually really didn't. I wasn't one of those people that grew up knowing exactly what I wanted to do with
Okay.
life. I only knew that I wanted to be involved in sports and play. One of the things I thought that I wanted to do was like broadcast journalism. Like I thought I wanted to be an announcer or commentator or, be on a microphone and talk sports. And
Hmm.
at the time, that seemed intriguing to me, but it wasn't like a passion either. I just wasn't real passionate about anything but like the very next day, what I'm going to do get better at my basketball game. And I didn't think enough about the future. There
Hmm.
was a time at the end of my sophomore year where my educational advisor was like, "Hey, you need to pick a major. Like, what are we going to do?" And I
Hmm.
think it really came down just some key coaches in the high school level in my life and family members and people around me that said, "Hey, you'd be a pretty good teacher. And if you want to stay involved in athletics, why don't you just do PE? Like, duh. And then you can coach." Because at the time, everyone's like, coaches are really just either PE teachers or social studies teachers that push play, put in a video and push play.
Yeah.
And that's not true anymore, by the way, but maybe it used to be. I
Right.
don't know. But so
Hmm.
I thought, like, okay, I love working with kids. Like at UNK, we did a ton of camps in the summer. You had to in college as a athlete, you have to kind of work the camps, and I loved working with little kids and teaching them the game of basketball. And I thought, well, this could be fun. So when I got my physical education and health degree, I kind of knew I wanted to come back to Lincoln. I wasn't missing anything. I just loved it there. I love growing up this way, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll have a family here someday and raise them in Lincoln. And so you just kind of at that time are focused on whatever's easiest to get started with your career. I will be
Hmm.
honest, back then there's no NIL or anything. I was my school was getting paid for, but I was broke. Like I didn't have any money. We didn't have time to work jobs. And
Right.
so I was so ready at the end of my senior year to just be employed somewhere. So I was like, I want to come back to Lincoln. I can live at home with mom and for the first year or something, make some money so I can get out on my own. And that's exactly what I did. I ended up at a Belmont Elementary. I got a job there. I had interviewed at a few different places and started at Belmont Elementary School and taught P there for 6 years while I was an assistant coach back at Southeast High School. So, the people who had coached me were still here. And so they just happened to have openings at the freshman level for
Hmm.
coaching right when I came back. So I graduated in 2000, came back, started my teaching career in 2000, 2001, and coaching as well. So I was freshman volleyball and basketball there for 6 years until I just stuck with basketball. And then I got a teaching job here at Southeast as well 6 years later. So went from elementary to high school. I started teaching and still stayed an assistant basketball coach here for the next 11.
Is that weird spending so much of your life as a student and then as a teacher and a coach? It's just you're in the same building. I mean, I'm assuming they're in the same building for
Yes.
decades.
Yes. It's bizarre. Yeah. I'll be honest, super weird. But on the other hand, and people give me a hard time about it sometimes, like, gosh, do you know there's anything else out there? You haven't even tried. You haven't even tried. And no, like, our mascot is the Knights, and so I tell people, listen, I'm a capital K Knight. I'm not just here for a short time. I'm here for the long
Right.
haul, and I don't have any intention of. I don't know. It never. I had lots of opportunities, as I was an assistant for again, one legendary coach. He helped me to grow in my ability to coach, and a lot of people, when new jobs were opening to be a head coach at other buildings here in Lincoln, I had people reach out to me and really want me to apply, and I just was like, I'll just wait for him to retire and be the head coach here. I really don't have any interest in going anywhere. And I was very aware, you know, I'm confident, but I also am very aware of what my skill set is ready for, and I knew timing of that wasn't ready for me. I wasn't ready to be a head coach. I needed just a few more years, and it just kind of all worked out. I suppose how exactly how God intended it to, but so I was an assistant coach for 11 years here, and then he retired, and I was able to be the head coach for 7. So yeah, just Southeast High School has kind of been this like climbing ladder of home for me. It's just kind of all fallen into place, and I'm really grateful because I do love it. It's very, very much family, very much home for me, but I can't see myself going anywhere else.
Something that you just mentioned a second ago, you said that the timing just wasn't right and you needed more time to develop your skill set. That I'll commend you. That is a level of maturity that a lot of people don't have, and they're always chasing the next great thing, and they don't stop to ponder if they're really ready for it or not. But what were the things that you felt you needed to fine tune or hone to then be ready to for the next step?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And some people thought I was just struggling to get out of my comfort zone, that Southeast was
Ah,
comfortable for me. And that's why I wasn't going
mhm,
anywhere. And so I had to fight that battle with some people too, just to really, because I think it is important for young, young people to see that it's okay to turn down opportunities if you know exactly what you want. And I had
mhm,
gotten to the point too where I felt like if I had started my own program at that time, there were little things that I just knew. One year when I felt like it was too early for me was I didn't feel like I was ready to lead other assistant coaches. I thought I could lead young people in basketball. I didn't think I was ready to be the head coach and be in charge of other adults. And then there was another year that came along and I felt like I think I actually really could do this, but I don't think that's the right place for me. I think it's not a good fit as far as what school was offering, you know? And
mm.
so I was just always really good at, and I don't know, again, I give my parents, my siblings credit for kind of raising me to be humble and understand that my work ethic and what it is I choose to do each day to represent myself and my family is going to be the most important thing. And I always felt like there was more I needed to do prepare. And as a matter of fact, I'm not sure I knew I was ready for this head coaching job when it happened, but when he resigned, my head coach called me and said, "You're ready. Don't think about it. You're ready." And sometimes for me, it's always been that. It's been a little push from someone I trusted at a time where I probably knew it down deep, but also needed a little push.
The the question that I like to ask is in every interview is mentors or people that you admire. Um, you mentioned a couple of times that this coach that you were kind of waiting for him to retire. What kind of things did he do as a mentor that helped shape you? What kind of relationship did you have? Was it one of those ones where behind closed doors, there's a bluntness there that I really don't like hearing what I'm hearing, but I know that he's trying to help me be successful? And were there other mentors or people that you admired in society that you wanted to kind of model your career after?
Yeah, I think so. I think that when I played for him for 4 years and it's not like it was a cakewalk. He was very hard on me. He was hard on me behind closed doors. He was hard on me in front of other people. Might even have been a broken clipboard here or there in a halftime. The expectation of me was really high. And you've heard people say when a coach stops talking to you or stops getting upset with you, then you should be worried.
Yeah.
I always knew he was hard on me for a reason and he was pushing me to be something better than I thought probably I could be. And he always made me feel that way. He wasn't perfect. There were times as an assistant coach for him, I was thinking about things like, what would I would do differently here if this was my program? What would I do differently? He encouraged that. He appreciated that about me. And for me, that's what a mentor is. It's someone who is, really more about making you better, making you more prepared for what it is you want, not what they want. And that's why sometimes I think it's almost better to find those mentors in people that you don't even know. Like for me, Pat Summitt was the head coach at the University of Tennessee, and I thought she was the greatest thing ever. So just
Oh, good grief.
watching interviews with her and
Yeah.
seeing the way she handled some situations, hearing people say, as hard as she was, they always talked about her glare and her stare. And yet
Mhm.
there's not a single, graduate of there that didn't. Well, first of all of her players graduated with a degree. And then second of all, they all have great things to say about her. And so I always wanted to be that kind of it encouraged me to be a mentor for other people then in turn. And I think those people, of course, like my dad, yeah, he and my sister, those are people that I emulate and want to be like in the way that they treat people and the way they at the time, and the fact that dad
Mhm.
played basketball, um, the way my sister treated people and how fun she was. And but at the end of the day, when you're talking about your profession and what you want to do, I was going into a profession nobody in my family had done. It wasn't teaching community in my family. I didn't grow up around those friends and people. This was I had to learn from my own teachers and coaches, and Coach Larson was one of those guys that he really just made me feel like I could get through anything, first of all, because he was so hard on me. I could handle it all. But also, that I believed this is if he believes in me and he thinks I can do it and I'm ready, then nothing can stop me.
I'm going to make my boys listen to this because, you mentioned the broken clipboard thing. Sometimes I don't think they realize that when they see that vein in my forehead and I'm giving them, a lecture, it's because I care enough to get upset because I know that they can do better than what they're doing right now. And sometimes when we're younger, we need those people that they're not just throwing a tantrum. They're not just yelling at you because they're upset. They're getting onto you and they're pushing you hard because they know that you can do better and they're wanting you to hold yourself to a higher standard. It sounds
That's
like that's
right.
what your coach was doing. So,
That's right. Yeah, the expectations are really high, and it's not just an expectation today or for
yeah,
this season, but it's every season for every day. And you gotta meet that standard every day. And we don't. Obviously, we all fall short, right? But
right. Yeah,
if you're pushing yourself to meet that standard every day, then there's more days than not you're gonna reach it.
yeah.
So that's important.
What Let's flip that around. You as a coach now, when you see a young person, because coaches, I mean, teachers have an influence over the students in their class, but coaches spend it's a different relationship between a teacher and a student and a coach and a student. And I think coaches get away with being able to be probably a little more stern with their players than a teacher can with their students. I may be a little off on that, but how do you how do you kind of mold your students and get them to believe in themselves enough to hold themselves to a higher standard?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that coaches do get lost a little bit sometimes. And now as an athletic director, I'm working more with coaches than I am with kids. So I've been through all
Yeah.
of these steps. But as a coach, I just remember feeling like it's so important that one, students have to know you care about them, yes. But they also
Mhm.
again have to understand sometimes they kids aren't great, and I wasn't either, I don't think back then at thinking of what their own personal and team goals are, like coming up with what you really want. And so instead of using the word goals, we just say, like, as a coach, like, I'm here to just put expectations in front of you. This is what we are here to do, and here's how we're going to get there. And so practices are not lined up and set up for you to, just have hoot of a good time every day.
Mhm.
Practices are going to put you through adversity that you're prepared then for that adversity when a game comes along. And then it's great because you get to, I always love just, it's the life lessons, right? Telling them how this applies later. I always told my players, in that 7 years I was a head coach, we're going through so much. And in year two, we ended up winning the state title, and it was this year after my mom passed away. And I always told them, I was
Mm.
like, listen, there's not a single moment that I think for a second I could have survived the death of my mom, who, she was my best friend at the time. Like, I couldn't have survived the death of my mom without what I had gone through in high school and college, in that adversity of being a part of family of players, right? That is led by
Mhm.
really, really hard, difficult, tough nosed coaches that put you through things you didn't think you could survive, and you did. You made it through, and you found success. And there are life lessons and applications in that I really believe I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't have those things. And so it's so much easier. And maybe again, I don't know if male athletes are the same as female athletes in this case. I never coached male athletes. I see them a little differently as an athletic director. They sometimes guys are so good at just like, I'm just gonna so I lost yesterday, okay, I'm gonna go play today and I'm gonna win. Like, there's just this like innate sometimes confidence that they're able to just go make it happen. And sometimes at least this is me as a coach, I've noticed that a lot of times we females, we just struggle with bouncing back as easily. Like, we internalize too much. We think everything's our fault. It's just, it's absolutely nonsense. But But what's cool about it is as a coach is being able to teach those kids again how to handle adversity. That not only is it okay to fail, but I am literally planning practices in the hopes that you will fail. Like, yes, and I tell parents that
Really?
we are trying to prepare your young people for what to do when there's failure. Because right now it feels like we're in a world where all we do is we try to make things easier so that you can get a
Yes.
trophy.
Yeah.
I want to make everything easy so that we can get a trophy and I can make you smile and you can have this great, great,
Hmm.
wonderful day. And I want that. I want every kid to walk out of my gym smiling, but it's just not, that's not life. And if we're not giving that lesson, then they get into a game situation and they have 10 turnovers and can't seem to get out of their own way in a game. And they've never been asked to handle adversity or fail in practice. So how do they know how to do it? And how do you bounce back and get out of that
Yeah.
in a game if you haven't been taught how to do it in practice? And so and that's something at home you don't learn. At home, you're told you're amazing. Like even me, I was like, "You're great, Kara. You're so good at this. Oh, great shot. Oh, that's okay. You missed one. Great job." Like, and that's
Yeah.
what parents are supposed to do. By the way, that's fine.
Sure.
That's
Hmm.
great. But when they get to us, especially at the high school level, as we're this close, you're so close to real life out there on your own. You got to learn how to fail and work through adversity so that you can really recognize the joy and the peace of success then. And success doesn't necessarily mean the scoreboard, just fighting through something and surviving it. Me surviving my mom's death was, it's like a state championship. So to me,
Yeah.
that's what it's all about.
No, I'd never heard a coach put it the way you put it there, where I have practices designed to make you fail. I mean, that's such a simple concept. And when you explain it, it makes perfect sense, but I've just never heard it
It
worded
sounds
like that.
evil, right? It sounds
Well, no,
evil. It sounds awful.
it's,
But if
it
you think
sounds
of it
perfect.
correctly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the first time you meet failure should not be when you're your first day on the job. You should know how to overcome it long before you get, into the real world. Um, you know.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So you've been a coach for, you said, 7 years, and then where did you shift gears into, I guess, upper management? You're the athletic director now. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So again, still at Southeast High School, can't seem to leave. But I after 11 years and as an assistant and 7 as a head coach, so 18 years of teaching PE and health and coaching every single day after school stuff, right? Throughout the year. For 18 years, I just thought, gosh, and I did start to get to a point a little bit where in coaching where I was like, this is it's not that it's harder, the landscape changed as well. So again, we're starting to get into a big social media age about, a decade
Oh,
ago,
yeah.
and kids were able to transfer all over and decide where they wanted to go to school based on where their friend was going to school, and everything was different, which there's nothing wrong with different, and coaches have to adapt. But for some reason, I felt like myself pulled a little bit more towards helping coaches navigate that whole new life more
Hmm.
so than actually doing it myself and to come up with strategies and helping them do that. I also felt like there were years there at the end of my head coaching career where I was struggling more to be joyful in it myself because I was so competitive. And we didn't have the skill level to have the expectation to be at the state tournament every year, and that's
Hmm.
okay, but it wasn't okay with me, right? So I was,
Yeah.
again, I needed to grow in my own leadership. And so I took some classes to there's a really good program at Doane College called Educational Leadership. And so it's a master's degree to become a principal or AD or uh, administrator
Hmm.
that that is set up for teachers. So you can be a teacher, and it was every you meet in like a cadre. And I met every Sunday with this same group for 2 years, and then in the summer there's a little bit more intense, like 2-week classes. But otherwise, it was set up perfectly for teachers, so you're not missing like Wednesday nights or Saturday. Like it was always Sundays, and then one Sunday a month, and then it was, intense in the summers, and it just worked out perfectly for me. And I love this program, and so I
Hmm.
ended up getting my degree through Doane. And again, as a person who's not a school person that doesn't want to just sit in class and read and
Yeah.
write, I loved it. It was great for me. So I got my degree. I didn't do anything with it for a couple years. I had no intention of actually, at that time, not coaching or teaching. As a matter of fact, at first, I really thought maybe I've been doing the same thing for 18 years. Maybe I'll just go a couple years just teaching and really focusing on my teaching job and not coaching. And I can support other people in the building and do other things. And that's silly for me to think I was going to get away from athletics in any realm. So,
Yeah.
and again, it kind of fell into place. So there was an assistant AD opening here where the athletic director really pushed me a little bit, encouraged me to apply. I said, I'm just not sure I'm ready to get out of the classroom. I don't want to get away from kids. And so he said, well, then don't get away from kids. Become an assistant AD and do it differently than people have done it before. Be around students and stay with that and stay involved with that somehow. Find a way. And so I did. I became the assistant AD here for 4 years, and then that athletic director kind of moved up to the district office, and so this is my third year as the athletic director. Again, still here at Southeast.
The master's program that you were talking about that worked well with your schedule, what types of classes or what types of topics do you take in it? Because that's a pretty specific program. Do you have like dry erase board classes and clipboard breaking classes, or what kind of stuff are you learning when you do that?
Yeah, it was such a broad program that again, it was for people who wanted to be a principal. It was for people who were taking the next step towards being a big
Oh, okay.
superintendent somewhere. So it wasn't just athletics, but that
Okay.
was always they did a really good job. They would bring in speakers of each of those areas so you could really determine what it is you wanted to do. I could have changed courses and thought, I think I'll be a great principal. And that's just not how I envision myself always around athletics. There were some people in my group that were going to be special education coordinate. There was a lot of different aspects of it, and so they teach. I mean, the classes were more general in that way. So one was
I
all
see.
about school law, and one so we didn't get ourselves sued as
Hmm.
administrators. One of them's just about just basic leadership, learning to. We did strength finders tests and learned more about ourselves, and then followed up and had to teach lead other adults who maybe don't get along as well or fit as well with their own strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that.
Hmm. So now that you are, for most of your career, you're looking forward. Now you have people underneath you that you are managing. What types of, if someone is coming up and they want to be a coach, what advice would you give someone to be successful in that line of work? And what things do you look for in someone that would be a successful volleyball coach, basketball coach, et cetera?
Sure. At the end of the day, like the main thing, there are a few things that I've kind of become my staple for what I'm looking for. And it's not the same for everybody, but it's how I handle it. So I'm not saying it's the right way, but the biggest and most important thing for me is that coaches understand, Billy Graham said that a coach changes more lives in uh, one season than anyone else can do in a lifetime. And I always
Hmm.
believe that. Like a coach is so, and I tell parents that every year as we get started in each sport. We're about to start spring sports here in the next couple of weeks, and I meet with our parents, and I'm going to tell them like your kid is about to spend more time with their coach than they do with you. So when they come home, if there's any way you could just make it a home and not make it all about what happened at practice and why they're not playing and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because a coach really does, to answer your question, the coach really does have to do a great job of getting to know kids, caring about them, and then ensuring that they know you care about them. And again, we're just in a day and age where people want things to be easy and they want you just to give them opportunity just because they walked in the door, not because they had to earn anything. And so
Mm.
teaching them those life skills that you really do have to earn it. And the great thing about coaching that I do love when it comes to that is that Sports are extracurricular, which means they are a privilege. They are not a right. Your
Hmm.
education is a right. So our
Yeah.
teachers do have to treat you a little different. Coaching is hopefully just like teaching. Hopefully you can do the same and hold them to the same standard. But on the other hand, if you're not pleased with how that's going, you have you don't have to be there. It is a privilege. And
Yeah.
so coaches have to do a great job of understanding that and really make it, a welcoming place for kids to be, but yet holding them to that high standard and getting that expectation out. And so I look for people that really are good at really three things. One, do you just generally make good relationships with kids and with other adults? You're not scared of talking to a parent. Like, that's kind of important. Two, and I mean just general talking. Like, there are some people that literally put their head down when they see a parent, even if the parent's just going to say hello.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. And then the second thing for me is that you can hold them accountable. That we're going to have expectations. We're going to have, whether that's to work towards winning or more so just to work towards getting better every day. I tell our coaches the key is that if your season starts in November for basketball, for instance, they better be playing better in February. Like, that's the idea.
Yeah.
There's got to be growth there as a team. So each group has got to really, you got to see growth at the end of the year, whether you're winning a state title or not. So that's exciting for me to always watch that happen. And then the third thing is, unfortunately, these days, like, you actually know what you're doing. Back when I was in high school, if a coach had told me how to do a technique in the high jump or something, I would have tried it. I'd have just done it because that's what I was told to do by an adult. And nowadays, adults are questioned a lot more.
Yeah.
There's like this freedom in young people. And by the way, it's not a bad thing always. It's
Hmm.
how they communicate it sometimes is bad. But I
Yeah.
like that we are pushed a little bit to prove why we're doing what we're doing. Like, what is this drill for? And again, so there might have been people that coached soccer way back when that don't know anything about soccer, but they're just coaches. And so they just got out there and rolled the ball out and they held the kids to a high expectation and then they actually did really well. Well, now you have to have soccer coaches that know something about soccer. And
Yeah.
so for me, it is important that you have a knowledge base of the sport, but that's probably third on my list as far as the whole relationships, high expectations and accountability, and then the knowledge of the sport.
Do you find that a lot of kids, what you just mentioned there about if they come to you and they say, "Hey, do a skill, do this," and you would just do it? Do kids nowadays want to know the why? And it's okay to know the why. If it's an accusatory type of an approach, that's probably a problem. But do you find most kids are wanting to learn the skill and then why they do that skill?
Yeah, I think they want to know. They either want to know the why, or another thing I've seen is that they've had these club coaches growing up that teach them differently, and
Oh,
so they
sure.
they want to know why we're doing it different than they
Hmm.
think that whatever I've been taught before is brilliant, or if Dad showed me how to do it, it must be their only way.
Yeah.
And so now, now it's more just kind of proving that I actually do know what I'm doing. That just try this for me and see how let's try and see how we do and how we improve at this level doing it this way. And then that's why, though, if you don't have success as a team, that's why then some of those kids and parents are more difficult to work with, just if they think that the way someone else taught it to that kid is better than what you're
Yeah.
doing. So that's what makes it more difficult. But
Are most people that are coaches or in your line of work, are they extroverted type personalities or are they introverts that can fake it well? Or is there a general personality style that you see in your career?
I think there's a combination of those. There's some good balance. There's some real extroverts that just love people and want to be around and have no issue walking up to you and saying, "What are you doing?" or "Hey, you look great today. Your
Right.
your your effort and your work ethic is killing it today." And there's others that I have to remind them, "Hey, that kid needs to be communicated with. They need to hear from you that they're doing that well." There's some more introverted people that think that if I'm not talking to you or upset with you, you should just know that you're doing a great job.
Mm,
And kids don't know that. You have to communicate that to them. And so different personality types are certainly a big part of how I work with coaches because some of them need me to pull in the reins, and some of them need me to push them to communicate better or more with kids as far as what's going on. Kids need to know a lot more now as to why it is they're not playing, or why it
Hmm.
is we're not finding success, or why does it feel like I can't make a free throw, or why in the world does this play never work in a game but it seems to work in practice, like whatever it might be. There does seem to be a need for more communication from coaches than it used to be.
Have you ever, and I don't want to, this is a delicate question, but you know, as a coach, you're going to have some students that come in and they want to play and they have the heart for it, but they are just so uncoordinated, or they just do not have the mindset to play a team sport, or it's just not in their wheelhouse. And that's not a negative. It just doesn't mean that they found what their thing is yet. How do you, or do you deliver that news? This really isn't for you. Or do you just try and encourage them and bring them up? And, how does that coaching and teaching scenario play out? Because it's got to happen from time to time.
Sure. I do think it's important to recognize like the age of the student, and if there is still just some coordination that needs to be worked out to make sure you don't
Okay.
squash their dreams,
Mm,
and give them the actual tools. The key too is like a lot of coaches now too. We at Southeast, we're so lucky because I think we recognize. I have people in place that recognize that, and so as freshmen, when these kids are coming, they're not just you know throwing in the towel on that poor kid long
yeah,
before they have an opportunity to grow and get better. And it might not even be coordination; it just might be a skill set that maybe that kid doesn't have, and he really wishes he did. Some people love watching March Madness, or they love watching college football, and so that means that's what I'm going to do, and it's just not there. That's not going to be it.
sure.
But to your point, at some point, I think the more we encourage people, especially at again, middle school and high school is so fragile, right? The more you encourage them that they can be whatever they want to be, please understand reality as well. So like,
Yes.
here's what you're squatting or deadlifting. Here's what I need you to be squatting or deadlifting by the end of your sophomore year. And I'm just making up a weird example,
No, I
which
get it.
none of, but you know, here's what you have to do to get there. Are you capable of, there's always it's a, I can't or I won't, right? So
Yes.
eventually a kid is going to see that in themselves. I think one of the coolest things for me that I get to see though is when coaches do a great job with it. Those student athletes end up, because you want to tell kids too. Again, my siblings are a great example because they wanted to be a part of sports, but it just wasn't their niche,
Hmm.
and for whatever reason. And so but they loved it. And so now my brother's going to attend the state girls basketball with me all week this week because he absolutely loves it. He eats sports up and he knows it really
Hmm.
well, like knows it all, knows sports really, really well. It just wasn't his thing for a long time as a kid. And so I want to encourage kids that they don't have to give up dreams. It's just going to get morphed into something else,
Sure.
right? Like just because you're not the college athlete doesn't mean you couldn't be a coach one day. Like
Sure.
you could be me. Why don't you become a manager and almost be like a student? You call them a student coach instead of a manager, just for their own ego, right? Their own self
Sure.
esteem,
Hmm.
and turn them into a person who just really loves it and supports you, and would go through a wall for you as a coach, and will do all the dirty work. But you're encouraging them that they can do whatever they want. It just not might not be as a varsity player at this
Right.
level, and trying not to squash those dreams, which sometimes, Tim, it just happens, right? Kids
Yeah.
feel like they just didn't make the team and they thought they were good enough, and so it's the coach's fault, and you just hope those kids find something else that brings them that same self-esteem and joy.
Yeah. The question of pay is something that I like to dive into a little bit. And I'm not asking
Okay,
you what you make, but
sure.
if someone's listening and they think, I think I would like to be a junior high, high school, collegiate basketball coach, or a coach in general, how does that typically play out as far as pay? Is it you're a teacher and then you also take on the job of being let's say a basketball coach in your case, and then there's additional income that's attached to those additional roles? Or how does that typically go?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is always dependent on too is like where you are in the country.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Here in the Midwest, in this area, you know, you get your pay is really as a teacher. So I think starting pay, for instance, right now as a teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska, is $45,000 or something like that.
Okay.
With obviously increases throughout, it has a whole ladder system. And then if you get your master's degree, you get even more money than that. If you get a doctorate, you get a little more than that on top of your teaching salary. But but the coaching part of that is what they call a stipend. And so
Okay.
depending on what level you're at, if you're a freshman coach, reserve coach, JV coach, and then varsity coach, that number increases. At the high school level, same thing at middle school, it's going to be a smaller stipend, but it's just a little, it's basically they're saying, here's some extra money for your time, even though they have no, you know, there's no concept of how much time you actually spend with
Yeah.
coaching. You know, it's not just during your season, but you're doing off season workouts and in the summer doing clinics and all that stuff. And there's not a lot of extra pay there. Now, I would say, so you really got to love it. That's things I like about it, actually. If you're here for the money, you're in the wrong one. But if you love it, if you love seeing just a, I remember my first year, sorry for the tangent, but my first year
No.
as a teacher at the elementary school, watching a kid try and learn how to jump rope and then for weeks not get that one time they finally get it, the pride that I feel in watching them light up is what you do it for. Like if you go
Sure.
home every day and think, gosh, I don't make enough money, then yeah, education might not be it. But you make enough. And education's also wonderful in retirement. But I
Yes.
would say this too, Tim, like if you're in Texas and you're a football coach in
Oh, yeah.
Texas,
You're going to be making some decent money.
you're going to make decent money just for coaching, and you may actually not have to teach at all. You may be like the equipment manager too, or something. You might be in charge of something else. That's different. So, depending on what part of the country you are in,
Hmm.
maybe I would say most places, though, most places you're a teacher first. And we sometimes have to remind coaches of that. You get paid the most for teaching for a reason. You're a teacher first, and then you're a coach second, which is for me, it's great for me as I lead people into that is that we're telling kids the same thing. You're a student first, you're an athlete second. The word student athlete is in that
Yes.
order for a reason, young
Right.
people, right? So you're a student first. It's the same thing for coaches. You're a teacher first. And then your coaching is a fun bonus. It's just a little bonus financially, but it's a bonus big time for other things.
I hesitate to even ask this question because I don't think that there's any career that you would be better suited for than the one that you're in right now. Because you can tell by talking with someone like yourself that you're just passionate about what you do. You are in your lane in life, and you're just smooth sailing. You're rolling, and you're in your wheelhouse. But if there was another career that, you know, 20, 30 years ago, you thought, well, I may want to do this, what would that career have been other than the one that you mentioned about the sports broadcasting?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that. I love it when someone recognizes that I do love what I do. 'Cause sometimes
Sure.
you're having a rough day and it may not seem that way on your face,
Mm,
but I do love it. I quite honestly just can't imagine being in a profession that wasn't surrounded by athletics.
yeah.
My dream job, if I'm going to be honest, my dream job has always been since I started coaching, probably in the last 20 years, is I want to be like a behind the scenes person for a big time basketball program that just watches film and comes up with scouting reports for you. Like I want to be one of those videographer people like behind the scenes that literally watches film. I'm going to have 15 different screens. I'm going to watch Iowa State play Nebraska, and then I'm going to watch Iowa State play UConn, and then I'm going to watch, and I'm going to be able to tell you the strengths and weaknesses of Iowa State so that you can go beat them. Like I want to come up with scouting reports for basketball programs. But outside of anything outside of sports, honestly, I don't even have a guess what I would do.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're really satisfied in what you're doing. So why even look elsewhere? You're doing what you're meant to do, and it's just I can tell that you're into it. Like you're committed to it. This is my thing, and this is
I
where I'm
do.
at.
I do
Yeah.
love it. And I was always a person too who really quickly recognized when I wasn't good at something. My sister's a nurse and I see blood and I want to like literally squeal. So like I'm very aware. Brother's brilliant, like a computer programmer and brilliant. And
Yeah.
I literally had to call him to ask him how to turn on this podcast. So, like there's things that I'm very good at recognizing what I'm not good at.
Hmm.
So I stay away from those things. That's maybe cowardly. That's my one maybe crutch in life, but I avoid things I'm not good at. And so that's something I could improve on. But what I am good at, I hone in on and I really do work to become better at. And as good as much of an expert as I could be in that area.
Well, I don't normally give people advice, but I'm gonna throw this out there. The thing you just mentioned a bit ago about doing scouting reports and watching video and whatnot, I think that is an idea for a YouTube channel, and you are passionate about it. Finding the time can be difficult to make something like that happen, but I would encourage you to look into that as a podcast or a YouTube channel because you are clearly into it. You know what you're talking about. There's an authenticity and a realness that would come across because you're not doing this necessarily for money, although it could turn into something. But I would encourage you to do a dig into that and see what's out there because I think you've got a good idea.
I love that. I love that. I could do that. I'll look into it.
All
Thank
right.
you for that advice. Are you
Oh
going to
yeah,
want some
well,
sort of are you going to want some sort of stipend if that
not
goes
a
well?
stipend. Just remember me when you become famous and everything. Just say, hey, I got my
Got it.
start on the Jobs podcast. So,
All right.
but hey, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking with you. There's a lot of interesting information. And anybody out there listening, that's some solid advice to follow your career.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully, you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.